Hi there, thank you for watching this third video about asking ICE questions. In this video we're going to focus on asking why and how you can use that to find out more about health beliefs and symptoms in a patient-centered way, how and when to ask ICE early, and more adaptions, for example, if the patient's already given you some information or if the patient doesn't give you much answers or throws the question back at you. So first, a fast reminder of those 8 takeaway points. Number 1 is ideas can be triggers as well as diagnosis. Concerns can be worst impact as well as diagnosis, and expectations can be tests, treatments, and other things. Number 2, don't use ideas or expectations as words in consultations. Use thoughts. Number 3, look to soften the language used so the patient doesn't feel like they're put on the spot. Number 4, adapt your ICE questions based on information you've already been given in the consultation. Number 5, look for a window of opportunity that allows the question to be asked in a more natural way and early if possible. Number 6, if you're given an answer, always ask why, so you get more insight to the health beliefs. Number 7, everyone's allowed more than one thought, so if they give you an answer, ask for another. And 8, be prepared with some comeback lines or further questions if required. So takeaway point 6 was about asking why. There's 2 big advantages of this. Firstly, you might get more information about the patient's health beliefs and the symptoms of the presenting complaint that you can ask in a patient-centered way. And the other is that even if you know the patient's ideas, concerns and expectations, it is very hard to negotiate with a person if you don't know the reasons behind that. So when you get important information from the why question, follow that through in a natural way. Keep the consultation going down that line. Don't feel like you need to stick to a rigid ICE agenda. Don't think, well, I've got an answer, I'm going to come back to my concerns question now. Allow the consultation to flow naturally, but remember, coming back to concerns, expectations if you haven't obtained that already. So if we run through an example, did you have any thoughts about what might be causing your symptoms? Well, yeah, I was wondering about thyroid. Okay, why was that? Well, my mum and my sister are both on thyroid tablets, and I looked it up and I've got some of the same symptoms that it said. Okay, what sort of symptoms have you got that you read about? Well, I definitely feel the cold more than I used to, and I feel like I'm getting constipated, and I've definitely put on a bit of weight. Right. And did you talk to your mum or sister about this? I did, actually. My mum said that I would definitely need a thyroid blood test, and I'd probably need to start thyroid tablets. So we have got almost all the information we need from that short little burst. Consultations don't usually work that perfectly, but they do happen to some extent. Right, remember our takeaway points. We've got one answer, we need to ask for anything else. So did you have any other thoughts about conditions that this might be, or tests that you wanted to talk about? So in that example, because I thought we've got a decent amount of information, I've actually combined the ideas and the concerns question, the expectations question together, just for time efficiency. An example of asking why when asking for concerns could be, you said before you were worried about your symptoms. Was there anything particular you were worried about? Well, yeah, I was actually worried about bowel cancer. Okay, why was that? Well, it's been going on so long. Okay, fair enough. Now, did you look up the symptoms of bowel cancer? I did, actually. I know you shouldn't, but I did, but I didn't. I've never noticed any blood in my poo, and I haven't lost any weight. So with that questioning, we've taken the opportunity to ask some more symptoms in a patient-centered way. We've ruled out some red flags, and we know that the patient knows about some of the red flags for bowel cancer, which we can use later. And an example for asking why when negotiating is needed could be, I need antibiotics for my chest infection. Okay, what symptoms have you had that made you thought of chest infection? Then we would run through the symptoms, obtaining data on that, and then at some point we'd come back to say, and what was your thoughts on needing antibiotics? Why did you think antibiotics might be needed? Oh, well, because I need to make sure this cough goes away quickly so I don't have to take any time off work. So uncovering ICE is very useful for time management. Not knowing that the patient's ICE doesn't match the doctor's management plan means that you're going to have a much longer time at the explanation stage. So, for example, if our doctor thinks it's a thinks it's a viral ERT and that antibiotics aren't needed, and if he doesn't know the ideas, concerns, expectations, his explanation is not going to match with the patient's health beliefs and expectations, so that consultation is going to go round and the doctor won't know why. The doctor needs to directly address the health beliefs and expectations in the management explanation. If you don't know the health beliefs, you'll be then trying to negotiate with the patient when you don't know their point of view. So it'll be just luck if you manage to explain it properly. You obviously get a lot of information when you're asking these ICE questions. Remember all the answers, because you need to then use those in the explanation. That patient's health beliefs need to be included, but make sure you don't explain anything too early, because you've got more data that you're going to gather. It might change as the data gathering continues. You can empathise and you can reassure that you will be discussing this later, but try not to explain anything at this stage. Explain in the explanation stage. Part of the windows of opportunity takeaway point was about using it early. Now, what I mean by this is I would certainly be advising using ICE, asking the ICE questions before the kind of end of data gathering, where you're doing some systemic inquiry, red flags, those sort of closed questions. You'd certainly want to use it before then. But if a window of opportunity presents itself, then use it. There's very rarely a reason not to take up on it if the patient gives you that window. An advantage of early ICE is that it means you'll be obtaining information in a patient-centred way, following the patient's concerns, asking about symptoms in that way, rather than a symptom-based doctor agenda. So, for example, with the thyroid and the bowel cancer, that was a way of asking about symptoms in a patient-centred way. If you haven't been given a window, then you can still use our initial questions. They were the, did you have any thoughts about what might have triggered these symptoms off? Or did you have any thoughts as to what was going on? And these can usually be worked into the consultation quite naturally after the patient has completed their opening batch of information. So if they give you, if they talk for a minute or so, give you a good range of information, or after the timeline, so you've gone to the timeline and found out more about the information, then at that stage, as long as you've got a moderate idea of the range of symptoms, what they are, you can then start asking ICE questions. Sometimes it is worth deliberately asking ICE early, and this would be if the presentation seems very complex or you're unsure of the reason for attendance. So for example, there are many symptoms, or the history seems vague, or the patient's presented before with the same thing and it's not obvious why they presented again. So the patient may have talked for a couple of minutes, they've given you a big range of stuff, and you're sat there thinking, there's so much here, I don't know where to start, these symptoms don't seem to match together, this seems to be exactly the same as what happened last time, what didn't happen last time, the patient wants to change. So in that situation, this is a perfect situation to ask your ICE questions. You could spend 30 minutes finding out about all of the history, when actually what you need to know is, what does the patient think is going on? What are they worried about? And what would they like help with? From a time management perspective, in all consultations, it's great to understand the ICE early, because then you will know the point of the consultation. Often you don't need to know all of the history and come up with all of the differential diagnoses and come up with all the treatment options if that is not why the patient has actually presented to you. You can then focus your data gathering on the actual purpose of the consultation. Takeaway point 4 was about adapting questions based on the information you've already obtained, and we looked at that with the windows of opportunity. Whatever the patient said, you would adapt that into the questioning. Another example would be if the patient has already given you an answer, you need to build that into your next question. So with a thyroid example, well, you would either start with other than, or you would end with that we haven't discussed already. So with the thyroid examples, you could say, other than thyroid, did you have any other thoughts as to what could be causing your symptoms? If you don't do this, they're going to look at you completely baffled and say, well, I've just told you I thought it was thyroid disease. So the concerns question could be, was there anything about having a thyroid condition that particularly worried you? And obviously that's concerns just for thyroid, so then you need to follow up with, was there anything else that was worrying you that we haven't discussed already? Then the expectations question could be, other than arranging a thyroid blood test, was there anything else you were thinking might need testing or doing today? The other than adaptation is good for this one or two things. So for example, thyroid and anemia, and the that we haven't discussed already could cover multiple things. You just don't, and then you don't have to list them all, or you've sort of stated it before, you don't need to state them every time. If you're ever given no ideas and no concerns, it's still worth asking for expectations. Often patients might not have a formed diagnosis that they want to share with you, or are a bit embarrassed to share, but they know what they want out of the consultation. So a man with abdominal pain might not be confident enough to say his diagnosis because that feels too medical, but they know they need a scan to find out why. So if you get an answer, follow the usual scheme and ask why, and then you may find out an idea or concern, and then you can start again the scheme from there. So I was hoping for a scan actually. Oh, okay, was there anything in particular you were hoping the scan would look for? Yeah, well, I was wondering if it might show up gallstones. And at which point we have an idea, which we can then ask for why, and then we can ask if they were thinking about anything else the scan might show up. And then we could ask, and then we could go on to a concerns question as well. So it might allow you to get back in. While you're asking all these ICE questions, it will not be unusual for the patient to bounce back to you, I don't know, you're the doctor. This is okay, it will happen. I ask these questions in almost every consultation. I very rarely get that bounce back to me, but it does happen sometimes. Most importantly, think about why that happened. How could you have adapted that question so it doesn't happen next time? However, it's good to have some response lines ready for this. If it's later in the data gathering, so you're almost at the explanation stage, you could say something like, well, I have some thoughts as to most likely causes for your symptoms and a plan forming about what to do about it, but I was interested to know if you had any thoughts. If you think it's too early to say that kind of line, then you could say, well, yeah, and I find it very useful understanding what the patient thinks is going on. And then you could add at the end, did you look up your symptoms or chat to anyone about it, as a way to try and get some nice answers after all. Most importantly with all this advice is you are the one using these phrases and questions, so you need to adapt them to how you speak and how you consult. Remember what works well when you feel it working well. Be aware when things don't work so well. Reflect on how you could have said things better in a similar scenario, then practice that and then improve. Good luck.